The world is watching as a geopolitical chess game unfolds across Central America, one that could fundamentally alter how goods move between continents. At the center of this high-stakes competition sits a small nation that most people couldn't locate on a map, Nicaragua. But what's happening there right now might determine the future of international commerce for decades to come. Picture this: a waterway so massive it dwarfs one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements. A project so ambitious it could cut shipping times between Asia and North America by nearly 2 weeks. And caught in the middle of it all? The escalating economic confrontation between the world's two largest economies, the United States and China. This isn't just about digging a ditch through Central America. This is about control. This is about who gets to determine the arteries through which trillions of dollars in global trade flow every single year. And right now, that battle is intensifying in ways that could reshape the entire international order. Before we dive deeper into this unfolding drama, I want to ask you to subscribe to this channel. We're committed to bringing you in-depth analysis of the economic and geopolitical forces shaping our world, and your support helps us continue producing this content. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Now let's explore why a canal in Nicaragua has become one of the most significant infrastructure proposals of the 21st century. The strategic puzzle. Understanding Trump's Panama play. To understand why Nicaragua matters, we need to first talk about Panama. In his 2025 agenda, former President Donald Trump floated an idea that sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles. The United States should reassert control over the Panama Canal. On the surface, this might sound like nostalgic imperialism, but look closer, and you'll see a calculated strategy aimed squarely at Beijing. The logic is straightforward but ruthless. By regaining influence over the Panama Canal, the critical choke point connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, the United States could effectively place a hand on the valve controlling China's access to Western markets. Every container ship carrying Chinese electronics to New York, every vessel transporting manufactured goods to European ports, every tanker moving products between Asia and the Americas, all of it passes through this narrow waterway. For Washington, this represents leverage. The kind of leverage that doesn't require tariffs or sanctions, but instead relies on geography and infrastructure. Control the canal, and you control who gets to use it, when they get to use it, and potentially at what cost. But here's where the story gets interesting. China isn't sitting passively while these plans develop. Instead, Chinese interests have been quietly exploring an alternative, a backup plan that could neutralize America's geographic advantage entirely. And that backup plan runs straight through Nicaragua. The concept is bold in its simplicity: build a completely new canal, one that doesn't depend on American goodwill or Panamanian politics. A waterway that could handle the massive modern cargo vessels that can't even fit through Panama's aging locks. A channel that would give China, and frankly, the entire world, an alternative route for global commerce. If completed, this Nicaraguan canal would reduce the voyage distance from America's east coast to its west coast by approximately 4,000 kilometers. More importantly, it would dramatically decrease Chinese dependence on infrastructure that could potentially be weaponized against Beijing's economic interests. This represents more than just an engineering challenge. It's a geographical revolution in the making, one that could fundamentally reorder global shipping patterns that have remained essentially unchanged for over a century. Why Nicaragua? Understanding the geography. Let's zoom in on Nicaragua itself, because understanding this country's unique position is essential to grasping why it's become such a focal point in this geopolitical competition. Nicaragua sits at the narrowest point of the Central American Isthmus. To its north lies Honduras. To its south, Costa Rica. Despite covering only about 130,000 square kilometers, making it roughly the size of Greece, and supporting a population of approximately 6.6 million people, Nicaragua occupies one of the most strategically valuable pieces of real estate on the planet. The country enjoys coastlines on both the Caribbean Sea to the east and the Pacific Ocean to the west. In practical terms, this means Nicaragua is a natural bridge between two of the world's most important bodies of water. It's a land connection between North and South America, and a potential water connection between the Atlantic and Pacific. Throughout history, nations have understood this value. In fact, Nicaragua wasn't always second choice for a transoceanic canal. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when the United States was actively planning its Central American Canal project, Nicaragua was actually the preferred location for many years. The reason? Lake Nicaragua, the largest freshwater lake in all of Central America. This massive body of water, measuring over 8,000 square kilometers in surface area, offered something the Panamanian route couldn't: a natural, ready-made waterway that connected to both oceans through river systems. Theoretically, this meant less excavation, fewer artificial structures, and potentially lower construction costs. From a purely geographical perspective, Nicaragua's advantages were compelling. Unlike Panama, where differences in elevation required the development of complex lock systems to raise and lower ships, Nicaragua's lake system suggested the possibility of a more naturally flowing canal, one that could potentially operate more efficiently and handle larger vessels. So why wasn't Nicaragua chosen originally? The answer reveals the technical and geological challenges that still confront any canal project today. The volcanic problem: why America chose Panama. Nicaragua sits along one of the most geologically active zones on Earth, the Pacific Ring of Fire. This isn't just a minor detail. It's a fundamental complication that has haunted canal proposals for more than a century. Across Nicaragua's relatively small territory, more than 40 volcanoes rise from the landscape. 19 of these remain active, constantly reminding anyone paying attention that the ground beneath Nicaragua is far from stable. Earthquakes occur regularly. Volcanic eruptions, while not daily occurrences, happen frequently enough to pose genuine risks to major infrastructure. Imagine investing billions of dollars and years of construction effort into a canal, only to have a volcanic eruption damage critical sections. Or picture a major earthquake triggering landslides that block the waterway for months. For American engineers evaluating options in the early 1900s, these weren't abstract concerns, they were deal breakers. Then there's the water level problem. Lake Nicaragua, despite its size, doesn't maintain consistent depth year-round. From May through October, when equatorial weather patterns bring heavy rainfall to the region, the lake swells significantly. But from December through April, when precipitation decreases dramatically, water levels drop correspondingly. For a canal operator, this seasonal fluctuation creates serious complications. Modern cargo shipping runs on tight schedules and precise calculations. Vessels are loaded based on exact specifications about how much draft, the depth of water they need to float, will be available. If water levels fluctuate unpredictably, it becomes extremely difficult to maintain reliable shipping schedules or guarantee that fully loaded vessels can safely transit the canal. These technical obstacles, combined with concerns about tropical diseases and the massive financial investment required, ultimately pushed American decision-makers toward Panama instead. In 1904, the United States officially took over the Panama Canal construction project from the French, who had bankrupted themselves in an earlier failed attempt. It took American engineers and workers a full decade to complete the canal, overcoming extraordinary technical challenges, fighting tropical diseases like malaria and yellow fever, and managing complex political negotiations. When the Panama Canal finally opened to ship traffic on August 15, 1914, it represented one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements: 82 kilometers of waterway that cost approximately $387 million, equivalent to roughly $10 billion in today's dollars, and required the labor of tens of thousands of workers. But there was another side to this triumph, one that's relevant to understanding today's tensions. The control question: Panama's long shadow. In 1903, just 1 year before construction officially began, the United States negotiated a treaty with Panama that essentially gave Washington complete control over a 10-kilometer-wide zone surrounding the canal. In exchange, Panama received just $10 million, a fraction of what the strategic value of this concession was truly worth. For the next 96 years, the Panama Canal operated essentially as American territory carved out of Central American soil. The United States collected the overwhelming majority of toll revenues. Approximately 90% of all income generated by the canal flowed to Washington, not Panama City. American law governed the canal zone. American administrators made operational decisions. The U.S. military maintained bases throughout the area. The situation was so extreme that Panamanian citizens needed to show passports simply to enter certain areas of their own country. This colonial-style arrangement understandably bred resentment that festered for decades. It wasn't until December 31, 1999, that Panama finally regained full sovereignty over the canal. The transfer was the result of treaties negotiated in the 1970s under Presidents Omar Torrijos of Panama and Jimmy Carter of the United States, agreements that recognized the fundamental injustice of the previous arrangement and established a timeline for eventually returning control to Panama. However, and this is crucial, American influence didn't completely disappear in 1999. The United States maintained several military installations in the region, and Washington's diplomatic and economic leverage over Panama remained substantial. The canal may have been Panamanian in legal terms, but American interests continued to shape how it operated and who benefited from it. Fast forward to 2025, and these old patterns are reasserting themselves in new forms. With Trump's call to regain control over the canal, and with Panama showing signs of accommodating American security interests, the dynamics that once defined the 20th century are returning with a 21st century twist. The new Cold War. Why the canal matters now. Here's where we need to connect the historical dots to understand current events. The reason Trump and American strategic planners are focused on the Panama Canal isn't nostalgia, it's about China. Over the past 2 decades, China has become the world's manufacturing powerhouse and its second-largest economy. An enormous volume of Chinese exports, everything from consumer electronics to industrial machinery, travels by container ship to markets in North America and Europe. Much of this traffic passes through the Panama Canal. According to trade data, goods worth tens of billions of dollars flow through Panama annually on vessels originating from or destined for Chinese ports. The canal reduces the journey from China to America's east coast from approximately 15,000 kilometers down to about 9,600 kilometers, a savings of roughly 5,400 kilometers. This translates to 10 to 15 days less travel time and nearly 40% reduction in shipping costs. For China's export-dependent economy, access to the Panama Canal isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And from Washington's perspective, that dependency represents potential leverage. If the United States could exert significant influence over Panama Canal operations, it could theoretically create complications for Chinese shipping. Not necessarily by closing the canal to Chinese vessels, that would violate international law and damage global commerce, but through more subtle means: increased inspections, administrative delays, priority access for allied nations shipping, or even just the implicit threat of future restrictions could complicate Beijing's logistics planning. This strategic calculation became more explicit in early 2025. In February, Panama's president made a surprising announcement. The country would not renew its Belt and Road Initiative memorandum with China, originally signed in 2017. Furthermore, Panama planned to terminate related agreements before their scheduled expiration in 2027 and 2028. Almost simultaneously, Panama indicated it would permit U.S. military vessels to transit the canal freely. a privilege not automatically extended to all nations' warships. These moves didn't happen in a vacuum. They represent Panama responding to American pressure and incentives, recalibrating its foreign policy to align more closely with Washington's strategic priorities. Then came the military signals. In March 2025, the U.S. military announced plans for major joint exercises in the Pacific region. Unlike typical announcements that couch military preparations in diplomatic language, American media coverage was remarkably direct. These exercises were designed to prepare for potential conflict with a major Eastern power, meaning, obviously, China. The pattern is clear. After attempting to constrain China's economic growth through tariffs and trade restrictions with limited success, Washington is now exploring what might be called geographical leverage, using control over critical infrastructure choke points to complicate Chinese logistics and project American power. Enter Nicaragua. The alternative route. This is where Nicaragua's potential canal transforms from an interesting engineering proposal into a geopolitical game-changer. If Nicaragua were to request Chinese assistance in building a new transoceanic canal, and if Beijing were to agree, it would fundamentally alter the strategic equation. China would no longer be completely dependent on the Panama Canal. Instead, it would have an alternative route, one potentially beyond American influence. Let's look at what this would mean practically. Currently, the largest modern cargo vessels, the Superpost Panamax ships that carry the most freight most efficiently, cannot use the Panama Canal at all. They're simply too large. Even after Panama's expansion project completed in 2016, which added a third set of larger locks, approximately 60% of the world's biggest cargo ships still cannot transit the canal. These massive vessels must take the long route instead. A ship traveling from Shanghai to New York, for instance, has to journey approximately 26,000 kilometers around South America, a voyage that takes roughly 40 days. A Nicaraguan canal, if built to modern specifications, could accommodate these giant ships. The proposed design would create a waterway 278 kilometers long, more than 3 times the length of the Panama Canal. More importantly, it would be engineered to handle vessels up to 250,000 tons, making it accessible to virtually any cargo ship currently in operation. For a ship traveling from Shanghai to New York, the Nicaraguan route would reduce the journey to approximately 19,000 kilometers, a savings of 7,000 kilometers compared to going around South America, and roughly 11 days less travel time. While this would still be slightly longer than the Panama route for ships that can fit through Panama, it would offer the crucial advantage of accommodating the largest vessels that currently have no Central American option at all. The benefits extend beyond just the China-US route. Ships traveling from East Asia to Europe could save approximately 5 days compared to current routing. Japan, South Korea, and other Pacific Rim economies would benefit equally from this reduced transit time. For global supply chains, these time savings translate directly into cost reductions and improved efficiency. When products move faster from factory to market, companies need less inventory in transit, can respond more quickly to demand changes, and reduce the capital tied up in goods sitting on ships. The economics. What's in it for Nicaragua? For Nicaragua itself, the canal represents something even more profound than improved global shipping logistics. It represents a potential escape from poverty. Nicaragua currently ranks among the poorest countries in Latin America. Its economy depends heavily on traditional agriculture and livestock raising, with relatively limited industrial development. Per capita GDP sits at just over $2,000 annually, among the lowest in the Western Hemisphere. But if the canal becomes reality, these numbers could change dramatically. Conservative estimates suggest that toll revenues alone could generate more than $3 billion annually for Nicaragua. To put that in perspective, that's more than double the country's current total government budget. The Nicaraguan state would suddenly have resources to invest in education, healthcare, infrastructure, and economic development on a scale that's currently unimaginable. Beyond toll revenues, the construction phase itself would create economic opportunities. Estimates suggest the project could generate at least 200,000 jobs, both directly in construction and indirectly in supporting industries and services. In a country with a total population of only 6.6 million, this would represent nearly 3% of the entire population gaining employment from a single project. Once operational, the canal would require permanent staff for maintenance, operations, security, and administration, providing stable, long-term employment for thousands of Nicaraguan workers. Economic projections suggest that if the project proceeds smoothly, Nicaragua's GDP could potentially double within 5 years of the canal's opening. The country would transform from one of Central America's economic backwaters into a regional hub, similar to how Panama's economy has benefited enormously from its canal. New cities would likely develop around the canal zone. Service industries catering to international shipping would flourish. Foreign investment would flow in as companies recognize Nicaragua's new strategic importance. The entire trajectory of the nation could shift. The 2013 vision, what almost happened. This isn't the first time Nicaragua has seriously pursued building a canal. The most concrete effort began in 2013, when a Chinese businessman named Wang Jing, backed by the Hong Kong-Nicaragua Development Group, or HKND Group, proposed exactly such a project. The plan was extraordinarily ambitious. Wang's team envisioned a 278-kilometer canal that would utilize Nicaragua's natural lakes, particularly Lake Nicaragua with its 8,264 square kilometers of surface area, as part of the route. The design called for a waterway capable of handling ships up to 250,000 tons, addressing the capacity limitations that plague the Panama Canal. The financial scope was equally staggering. Initial estimates placed the total cost at approximately $50 billion, though some analysts suggested the real figure could reach $100 billion once all construction challenges were accounted for. Despite these enormous numbers, Wang and his backers expressed confidence they could complete the canal within 7 years, with a target opening date before 2020. The Nicaraguan government enthusiastically supported the project, granting HKND Group a 50-year concession to build and operate the canal, with an option to extend for another 50 years. For a brief period, it seemed this century-old dream might finally become reality. Construction was scheduled to begin, and Nicaragua established a special canal authority to oversee the project. But then, nothing happened. What went wrong? The project that stalled. By 2018, no meaningful construction had begun. Wang Jing's personal fortune, reportedly around $10 billion at the project's announcement, had collapsed following stock market losses in China. The Hong Kong-Nicaragua Development Group went silent. Environmental concerns about the canal's impact on Lake Nicaragua and surrounding ecosystems gained international attention. And perhaps most tellingly, the Chinese government made a point of distancing itself from the project. In 2018, the Chinese ambassador to Panama explicitly stated at a public forum that the Nicaragua Canal was purely a private investment venture and that the Chinese government had never been involved. This was a significant declaration, essentially signaling that Beijing would not be providing state backing or financial support for the project. By 2021, both Wang Jing and the HKND Group had effectively disappeared from the canal discussion. The massive construction project that was supposed to reshape global trade had stalled before the first shovel entered the ground. However, and this is the interesting part, Nicaragua never dismantled the Canal Authority. The government kept the institutional framework in place, maintaining the legal and administrative structures that could theoretically be activated if a new investor appeared. Then, in 2021, Nicaragua made a major geopolitical shift. The country severed its diplomatic recognition of Taiwan and formally established relations with the People's Republic of China instead. This was a significant move, as only a small number of nations continue to recognize Taiwan diplomatically, and switching recognition is always a meaningful political signal. For Nicaragua, the timing and context strongly suggest this diplomatic realignment was connected to the Canal Dream. By establishing formal relations with Beijing, Nicaragua positioned itself to potentially attract official Chinese government support and investment, not just private ventures like Wang Jing's failed attempt, but state-backed financing through institutions like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank or China's development banks. The message seemed clear. Nicaragua wants Chinese help building the canal, and it's willing to align itself with Beijing's foreign policy priorities to get that help. China's broader strategy, beyond just Nicaragua. While the Nicaragua Canal remains more vision than reality, China hasn't been sitting idle in Latin America. Instead, Beijing has been systematically developing alternative infrastructure and relationships throughout the region that could reduce dependence on the Panama Canal, regardless of whether Nicaragua ever gets built. One of the most significant recent developments is the Chance port in Peru, which officially began operations in November 2024. Located approximately 80 kilometers north of Lima, Peru's capital, this massive port facility represents a total Chinese investment of $3.6 billion. Chance features 4 major berths designed to handle the largest container ships in the world. The initial capacity is designed for 1 million 20-foot equivalent units annually, with plans to expand to 1.5 million TEUs in the future. This makes it one of the largest and most modern port facilities on South America's Pacific coast. But Chance's significance goes beyond just its size. It represents a crucial node in what could become an entirely new transcontinental logistics network.